She came in after a day at the Waterpark burning with fever. By 2 a.m., we'd turned July into January, and the monitor was still screaming. We had one chance to stop a brain eater that hates the cold, if the medicine could beat a thunderstorm to our door. At 2:11, the room is winter on purpose. The cooling blanket hisses like a tame blizzard. My scrubs are damp and the air bites straight through them. The pressure monitor over the bed saws at our nerves with every spike. On the sheets lies a 12-year-old stitched into a web of tape and lines, glitter still clinging to the nail of her smallest finger as if daylight left a breadcrumb. I whisper, cooler, and I don't mean comfort, I mean life. What does it take to make a brain forget to swell and remember to live? Pediatric ICU nights are mostly repetition and manners. Our vents wear cartoon stickers. Parents sleep in recliners with bath towels over their shoulders because hospital blankets are too eager and somehow less warm. The floor wax smells like bleach, the break room smells like burned coffee, and the hallways smell like every decision anyone has ever made at 3 in the morning. July presses its hot face to the windows. Inside, we draw the shades and pretend we control weather. I'm Erin. I micromanage when I'm scared. It's a superstition I wear like a ring. I count drops. I line syringes like parade floats. When a pump alarms, I think it out loud and mean it because gratitude keeps my hands from shaking. Last year, we lost a septic toddler on a Sunday. For weeks afterward, I tied a neat bow on a stuffed bear and left it in the family room, as if civility could bargain with gravity. My mentor taped a note to my locker. Control what you can. Name what you can't. I keep it folded behind my badge where it worms like a coin. At 1940, the ED paged, meningitis kid doesn't read like bacterial. The resident's voice had that static edge you get when your hands are ahead of your words. High fever, pounding headache, stiff neck, labs that wouldn't choose a side. Waterpark today, she added, the kind of detail that turns a hallway into a tunnel. Later, when the room was too bright for lies, her mother would say the line that landed like a key in the wrong lock. She said the water smelled like pennies, but she didn't want to leave. In the ED, the infectious disease fellow said the quiet part into her sleeve before she made herself say it to the air. It might be amoeba. The word rearranged the oxygen. We don't speak its long name unless we must. Naegleria fowleri, a heat-loving single-celled thing that swims up the nose, steals a ride along nerves, and lights the brain on fire. In my head, I wrote Pam and drew a box around it. Primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, the monster under summer's shallow end. When Never tries to enter a room like ours, we translate it into verbs. Broad antimicrobials now. Call the CDC for miltefosine, the last chance drug. Move her upstairs. Make the room into January. We roll her in at 20:57. Kali, 12, stubborn in the useful way, the kind of kid who would argue with a vending machine and win. That smear of glitter at her cuticle insists she had better plans. Her mother follows with a beach bag stuffed with towels and disbelief. Her father arrives all breath and keys and apology to no one in particular. I give my usual introduction to a child whose eyes won't stay open. I'm Erin. Bossy but nice. We do quiet things quickly here. We secure the airway because oxygen is a stupid thing to lose. Lines in both arms because speed likes a highway. We hang the broad stuff with names that sound like law firms: amphotericin B, rifampicin, azithromycin, fluconazole. I translate while I click tubing into pumps. Big antibiotics and antifungals. We're covering the map while we wait for the special one from the CDC. A small oversight pulls up a chair and tries to look harmless. The temperature on the monitor reads lower than my palm believes, a half degree off, maybe 1. We're using a Foley temperature probe, practical, fast, the workhorse, and in a night like this you forgive small sins to spend time on big ones. I press my gloved hand to her belly, her thigh. Too cold for that number. I promise myself I'll swap the probe once the first labs are sent. An alarm grabs my ear. The promise evaporates. We deepen sedation. Pain is a thief that steals oxygen and calm, and we can't spare either. Neurosurgery threads in an ICP monitor. The tracing draws a staircase made of teeth. I think of the skull as a rent-controlled apartment. If swelling wins, the tenant loses the only home it has. CT ready, a voice says, and the scan replies with early swelling you can deny if you feel fragile. I am not allowed to be fragile. Miltefosine. I call to pharmacy. Not on site comes back. CDC has it. Courier airborne. The radar shows thunderheads flexing like bullies. ETAs in Arkansas July are folklore. We write miltefosine, CDC courier on the whiteboard anyway, because Hope likes to see its name in ink. We bundle, the fellow says. All of it at once. She looks at the cooling blanket the way you look at snow chains in July. The amoeba hates the cold. We take the parents to the family room and leave the door almost closed so the machines can pretend not to eavesdrop. Our attending sits like a man who has told too many storms how they work. There is a rare amoeba that lives in warm freshwater, he says. It can enter through the nose and travel to the brain. It causes severe inflammation, swelling, that can be deadly quickly. It is very rare. The mother turns a tissue into a white pebble. The father nods like a person trying not to rock the boat. We are cooling her body to slow the swelling, I add, the way you add a log to a small fire. We've started strong medicines now, and a special anti-amoeba drug is coming from the CDC. We'll treat the pressure in her head. We'll talk to you constantly, and we'll be honest. If there's a chance, her mother says, she would take it. She's stubborn on purpose. Good, I tell her. We need that. They sign a line for compassionate use. I sign as witness and draw my letters neat, as if tidy handwriting can make consequences mind their manners. We turn July into January. Gel pads hiss. The blanket exhales. A fog of cold climbs and disappears as the vents catch up. Our target isn't a single number. It's a narrow hallway. Too warm and you invite the enemy. Too cold and the heart has opinions. The ICP takes up residence near my left ear and begins its sermon. At 2240, we push hypertonic saline, a salty tide to pull fluid out of irritated tissue. The pressure dips and then argues. At 2321, Kali slides down another step on the elevator the brain uses when it's offended. Manitold joins the dance. Her pupils stay equal. Her body invents new ways to complain. The EEG tech arrives. A cap of tiny wires crowns her head and the screen scribbles like a spider in moonlight. For a second, the pattern looks organized, the sleep kind of organized. Artifact, someone calls, the polite word for doesn't match the exam. I tell the tech to bookmark it anyway. Sometimes the first truth wears the wrong coat. Amphotericin leans into her kidneys like a friend who's useful and dangerous in the same breath. The monitor flirts with an arrhythmia. We refill electrolytes and stand over the numbers like night watch. The lab is slow because storms make tubes late. Pharmacy is jumpy because storms make couriers later. The fellow drums time with the CDC on her phone, courier in the air, storm line bending the wrong way. I write ETA 2:30 to 3 o'clock on the board, large enough to be a billboard. The board likes certainty. The sky does not. At 0:12 a.m. weird quiet settles. It happens when everything aligns just long enough to scare you. The temperature readout ticks in tidy tenths. My palm says no. Under my glove, Kali's skin feels winter hard. The Foley probe is lagging half a degree, maybe more. Overcool and you swap one problem for a new one. I pinch a fold of thigh skin, count to 5, watch how slowly it blushes back. Too slow for the number on the screen. Probe swap, I say, and Inga is already there with the esophageal one. The new readout jumps 2 notches. I breathe like a person whose lungs remember the trick. Hands beat screens, my mentor says. Screens win when they agree with hands. Good catch, the attending murmurs without taking his eyes off the ICP. The waveforms look less like teeth and more like hills. At 0:45, Kali's mom returns that penny detail to the room like a talisman. She said the water smelled like pennies. The fellow nods, hating that it matters and loving that it clarifies. We're trying to make the water inside her smell like winter, she answers, half for the mother, half for herself. We don't write it that way in journals. We do it that way here. The mother smiles with her mouth and not with anything else. That's the shape bravery takes on long nights, polite, lopsided, stubborn. After midnight, the numbers argue like tired siblings. The pressure spikes the way kids spike balls, triumphantly and at the one person not looking. We treat, wait, treat again. Cooling hums steady. The storm licks the windows with rain. The generator coughs once to remind us it has lungs. I keep making a small, stupid promise to the whiteboard. If we can keep her between the rails until the drug arrives, we have a fight worth showing up to. At 1:06, I take a breath the size of a thimble and let a memory in, just the corner of it. The septic toddler from last year, the room that didn't listen, the bow on the bear. I let it land where it can't grab the wheel. Name what you can't. Control what you can. I check the foresights. I check the gel seams. I check the pump batteries because petty failures love big nights. At 1:30, the EEG writes its organized murmur again. I feel it before I understand it, the way a familiar song walks into a bar and every head lifts. Still artifact? I ask. The tech tilts her head. If it is, it's very consistent. She bookmarks with a tiny flourish that means worth remembering. Neurosurgery drifts to the doorway, quiet in the way people are when they work inside skulls. We're ready if you need an EVD, the resident says, external drain to let extra fluid escape and pressure ease. I'm not brave enough to like the idea. I'm practical enough to have the tray checked twice. The attending nods, not yet, but soon have asked. At 1:52, Kali's father returns with a hoodie that smells like a driveway and summer. He stands at the foot of the bed and doesn't touch anything because everything looks like it could shatter. She hates being cold, he says to no one in particular. We'll warm her later, I promise, which is the kind of sentence you can tell the truth about only 1 hour at a time. At 2:07, the courier calls through static and weather. 20 minutes out if the storm behaves. I write miltefosine ETA 225 to 235 and draw a box around it. I do not draw a heart. I am not above superstition. I respect it. I glance at Kali's hand while changing tape. The glitter on her pinky has survived pools and towels and sanitizer and the rough grip of fear. We can fix that, I tell her softly, meaning both the chipped polish and the larger thing I can't say. Inga leans close. I've got purple with sparkles, she whispers, because she keeps treasures in her pocket for when the room needs proof there's a later. Kali doesn't move, but we talk to her anyway. We always do. They're going to post new signs at the park someday, I tell her, borrowing hope from a future we haven't earned. Big ones. No one gets to say they didn't know. Her mother hears that and presses her lips together around a sentence she'll say to a city council when she's ready. At 2:14, the ICP climbs again like a child determined to reach the cookie jar. Mannitol in. A whisper more cooling. A micro-tweak of sedation. The EEG answers with its polite secret. The drain tray glints under the lights like a possibility with manners. The storm thuds once, big palm, glass, and the lights stay steady. I put my hand on the rail and feel the bed's quiet tremor, heart, ventilator, cooling blanket, human intention braided together. Control what you can. I smooth the blanket, check the pad seals, tighten a line that thought about being loose. I do not look at the clock. I can hear it in the pump. At 2:31, the courier steps through the automatic doors like a rumor turning into a person, rain-slick jacket, styrofoam chest held out like a gift he doesn't own. We sign. Pharmacy treats the vial like an egg with a milk inside. I write the time on the board in numbers as fat as my marker will allow, 2:45. Then under it, time 0 in smaller print, because big letters are for hope and small letters are for work. The room doesn't change color. No string swell. What happens is smaller and worth more. The muscles in my shoulders lower by the width of a coin. Inga lets out a breath that only someone listening for it would notice. The attending nods once, not at us but at the clock as if thanking it for behaving. We hang the dose. Amphotericin sulks and then cooperates. The cooling blanket squeals because gel pads are fussy. I reseat them and whisper the kind of apology I give to machines that believe they are cats. The EEG settles into a pattern that looks less like chaos and more like a nap. The ICP pauses on a ledge as if weighing its options. By 3:05, the night tries to do 4 things at once. The monitor flirts with premature beats. We refill potassium and call the heart back into line. The lab calls with a number that matters, and we write it where numbers can be trusted to behave. The generator clears its throat and decides to be decent. A cleaning machine hums down the hall like a lullaby for linoleum. Give me 2 hours of numbers that remember the rules, the attending whispers to the air. If the air laughs, it does it politely. At 3:22, the EEG draws a small, organized island. Still artifact? I say, because habits hold us together. If it is, it's the most persuasive artifact I've seen. The tech answers, smiling at the screen like it just told a harmless lie. At 3:36, Neurosurgery places the EVD with a hush and a nod. Amber cerebrospinal fluid taps into the chamber steady as a kitchen clock. The ICP waveforms flatten a hair. Kali's skin under my glove feels less winter-hard, more like cooled porcelain, the thin kindness that happens when heat agrees not to be a bully. By 3:50, the pressure plateaus at a number we won't say out loud for fear it will take it personally. We live there. The EEG writes its polite secret again. I circle the time in my log and put a dot next to it the way you mark a map when you've found water. The whiteboard gleams with our verbs: cooling, osmotics, sedate, drain, dose, and the billboard time, 2:45. At 4:10, we see the first honest creep down. Not a slide, a courtesy. We don't touch anything dramatic. We adjust a hair here, a breath there. July outside, January inside, and in the space between, a child who loves water parks and nail polish holds her ground while we hold ours. Reworm? Someone asks, because hope is an itchy coat and your hands want to shrug it on too early. The attending tilts his head and listens to the room like it's a field and he knows what wind means. He looks at me, the way he does when he hands me a little piece of the night to carry. I feel the folded note behind my badge press into my chest. Control what you can. Name what you can't. Not yet, I say. Walk the numbers a little longer. He nods. The room nods with him. Outside, the storm is out of sentences. Inside, a line of amber drops into a chamber like a clock we can finally hear. I press my gloved hand to Kali's forearm and think about the glitter on her pinky, the sign by the shallow end that isn't there yet, and the fact that sometimes, if you make enough January in a July building, never has to knock before it comes in. We don't plan to answer. By 4:20, the room had learned our cadence. The cool hiss under the sheets, the ventilator's soft hush, the steady tap of amber drops into the drain, the low choir of pumps pretending to be well behaved. Outside, the storm ran out of language and stood there breathing. Inside, the pressure curve stopped acting like a dare and settled into something that looked almost like manners. We didn't smile. We took inventory with our hands. Pad seams smooth, lines unkinked, tape flat, numbers true. In a unit that survives on verb tenses, hold is sometimes the bravest one. I'll take boring, our attending whispered. Boring for hours. Boring is how we talk about miracles while they're still deciding whether to stay. There was nothing dull in that room. Cooling that had taken a night to earn needed constant trimming to keep from drifting. The drain might give more than it should. Amphotericin could still prove it was a chainsaw pretending to be a friend. The EEG scribbled a polite, organized murmur that didn't match the exam and therefore demanded patience from the kind of people trained to jump. Parents slept in chairs at angles spines don't love, not because anyone told them to, but because love refuses beds it hasn't earned. At 4:30, Sonia from respiratory slipped in with fresh gel pads folded like winter linens. She pressed her warm palm to the edge of the cooling blanket where it met Kali's shoulder, testing the seal by feel, trusting skin more than digits. We're in the hallway, she said, our shorthand for that narrow corridor between not cold enough and too cold to be kind. She drew a tiny snowflake on the post-it where she'd written our target. I pretended not to see it and saw it anyway. Superstition makes good scaffolding if you don't let it drive. Kali's father woke with the crash you get from sleeping in a bad chair, a grunt, a guilty cough, the stretch of a man re-entering his bones. He stood and did what so many parents do at this exact corner of the clock. He found the bed frame with 2 fingers and held it like it might drift. Kali's mother, head tipped back, hand palmed over her eyes, breathed with the even stubbornness of people who won't cry until someone says their name just right. "Tell them about the plateau?" Inga asked softly. "We'll tell them about the trend," I said. "Plateaus break hearts. Trends endure arguments." 442 ticked in the corner of the monitor like a chore we hadn't done yet. The pressure dipped a hair. Coincidence or gift, we refused to decide. We did small things perfectly, retaped a jealous corner, floated a line where it wanted to scuff the rail, measured the CSF column with faces made of porcelain. The EEG's neat not-quite-sleep drew another lap on its private racetrack. The tech glanced up. I gave a 2-finger salute that meant, "I see it. I'll keep it in my pockets with the other quiet goods." At 4:59, the lab called with numbers that behaved like citizens. Sodium where we'd invited it, potassium back inside the fence after we bribed it with salts. The attending's shoulders lowered by the width of a thumbnail. On the whiteboard, he printed "stay small," not a medical term, a survival tactic. We did. We moved like people cradling a sleeping cat that will bite if jostled. Sonia retaped the gel so the adhesive wouldn't take skin with it later. Inga changed a line dressing with cathedral seriousness. I checked the new temperature probe and, for the first time since midnight, felt a number I trusted under my palm. The blanket squeaked. I flattened a seam. It sighed and minded its manners. 5:11 arrived with the EEG's most courteous phrase yet, organized, soft, like the first good paragraph after a long outline. "What's your read?" I asked the tech. "Opinions in pencil," she said, smiling at her screen. "But the pencil's getting dull. We will take optimism disguised as office supplies." "Reworm?" the fellow asked, holding the word by the tail like a match you haven't struck. The attending listened to the ventilator, to the drain, to the peculiar hush that falls when a room wants to change the subject. Then he looked at me the way he does when he wants a second compass. I pressed my badge, felt the folded note like a coin under my thumb. Control what you can. Name what you can't. Walk the numbers, I said. Make them court us. By 5:30, the storm outside licked the windows twice like a bored dog and wandered away. The building did that shift change pivot night jokes pocketed, day crew not yet loud. The parents woke with the same inhalation and each found their post without conferring, hands on rails, knuckles pale. The pressure is behaving, the attending told them. The medicine is in. We're keeping her cold on purpose. The drain is doing its job. We'll hold the course. They nodded, not because this was the triumph they wanted, but because grammar matters when you are drowning. Talk to her, I said, because voices belong in the bundle. Her mother bent close and made a list of small promises. Pancakes with strawberries when allowed. Sunscreen that smells like coconut next time because last time betrayed them. A bottle of purple polish called Starlight waiting on the dresser. Sparkle with clearance, she said, and Inga laughed silently, which is the nurse version of applause. 5:46 delivered a number I could have written in billboard letters. I didn't. I put a small dot next to the time and wrote steady in my neatest whisper. Liv squeezed my forearm with 2 fingers, enough to register, not enough to wake a superstition. At 6:02, a faint wrinkle visited Kali's brow and left. Artifact or intent? You get to pick, but you pay for whichever you choose. I logged it anyway. Brow at 6:02. The word so tiny I'd need to squint later to remember it belonged to Hope. At 6:10 we started the slow thaw. If you've never watched temperature return on purpose, it looks like training a wild bird to eat from your palm 1/10 of a degree, breath held, no sudden glances. We nudged. The blankets hiss softened. The drain tapped an even V'd. The pressure curve sat on its good hill and refused to grandstand. The EG wrote the same domestic sentence again that you only notice if you've read the book twice. 6:21. Fingers flexed around nothing, then thought better of it. I offered my pinky, the way you offer a newborn a piece of the world. Greedy request, I whispered. Do that again? She didn't. The metronome under the bed didn't care. Mercy doesn't. 6:27. Another 10th. The heart stayed polite. The blood pressure yawned, attended, did not invent trouble to feel important. We adjusted nothing else and took credit for less than we wanted. At 6:31, through the tape and the tube and the exhaustion, I watched the small choreography of a mouth making an M. Inga bent down, shameless, and offered the word. Mom? The mouth obeyed like a student who finally recognized the answer on the test. M-O-M. Kali's mother made a sound that would embarrass you to overhear unless you'd earned it. She had. She kissed the ridge of her daughter's fingers and said, I'm here, once for the room, once for the part of the body that hears from farther away. We did not ask for applause from God or the generator. We put the time on paper. The attending rote-mouthed Mom in tiny letters as if he were slipping it under a door. He rubbed his temples, not in pain, but in relief he refused to perform. 6:40, another sliver up. The curve declined to misbehave. My shoulders, traitors that they are, dropped, then crept back up to the height of professionalism. At 6:51, her hand missed my finger and found her mother's. The squeeze was more intention than force. Intention counts. We let it be enough. Hold at this temp, the attending said. Let her live here. We lived there together through the routine's gentle, maddening rotation. Other kids cried down the hall, supply carts squealed, lab runners apologized for tubes mislabeled by weather. We took bathroom breaks like heists and returned with guilt and better judgment. I drank coffee so stale it had learned wisdom, and it tasted like something other than defeat. By 7:30, the city announced itself with buses and dogs and someone's leaf blower trying to make a point. The EEG matured into a pattern I'd sign my name under. The drain slowed to a polite drip. The blanket purred like a thing that had remembered its purpose was lullaby, not law. We flirted with the idea of breathing without as much help. We didn't yank. We courted. We turned the ventilator down in increments that would bore a novelist and please a pilot. Her chest considered responsibility and took it in sips. We let the machine do the heavy lifting and praised her for the grip on the rope. Her friends texted a photo to her mother around 8:45, the bright blue slide they'd skip next time, a caption that said nose clips, don't laugh. I didn't say anything, but I thought about signs and about sentences that start in hospitals and finish on fence posts. At 9 o'clock, she squeezed hard enough to argue with a thumb. At 9:17, she tried to tilt her head, learned gravity still had rules, and rested. We let rest be victory. We lowered the cool another shade until the number lived near autumn. Amphotericin kept collecting on our kidneys like a loud neighbor. We paid the electrolytes and kept receipts. Miltefosine, our late hero, turned into a line on the MAR, just another time to circle, another initial to write, the alchemy by which rescue becomes chore. By 10:30, she tolerated a minute of breathing more on her own than not, followed by 2 minutes of machine rescue, followed by another minute on her own, intervals you can easily mistake for nothing if you've never begged for them. At 11 o'clock, the water allowance ceremony, a sponge, a tilt, a swallow. She made a face at the taste like any kid would, and Inga assured her the world had better flavors when it stopped needing proof of life in every sip. At 11:20, lips to letters. Cold, she mouthed, or maybe home, or maybe hold, words with shared bones. We granted cold because it came with a laugh small enough to fit between beeps. Kali rolled her eyes at us, an adolescent full-body punctuation mark that could have powered a wing of the hospital, and we accepted it as sacrament. Noon allowed us to take the cool down one last polite measure. The drain puttered. The EEG showed a tidy nap. We did not turn the winter off. We folded it back a corner. The attending touched the whiteboard where stay small sat above our verbs and left his fingertip there like a seal. The afternoon put its warm hand on the windows. Extubation turned from rumor to plan. We negotiated thresholds, sketched the shape of failure and what we do inside it, an outline that looks like pessimism and is actually love. At 14:30, she took 3 unaided breaths in a row and then scowled at the plastic, and we told her she was excellent at life. At 1500 hours, Jonah from PT sauntered in with the cheer of a Labrador and coaxed a 1/4-inch thumb lift. "Rent money," he said, and her mother laughed the kind of laugh that leaves salt at the corners of the mouth. The evening shimmered into a version of ordinary. News murmured in the doorway, untroubled by the concept of relevance. Someone delivered broth with a politeness that proves soup can be sacramental. Kali dozed with the deprived grace of a child learning to forgive hospitals. I took a break that tasted like crackers and fluorescent cheese, and I reread the note behind my badge like it might have grown a second sentence overnight. It hadn't. It didn't need to. Night again. Not the battle night. This was the watchman's night. We tuned, we tidied, we taught the room how to trust. At 2:05 the next morning, we extubated. Not cinema, suction, count, pull, cough, mask, watch, wait, breathe. She did. The monitor tried to scare us and failed. Cold, she whispered, "This time is air and not theater," and Inga tucked a warm blanket around the edges where the cool still lingered on purpose. The drain left later that day taped gauze, a dot of blood, a future scar small enough to be a true story without offering gossip to strangers. Amphotericin completed its loud, righteous business. The miltefosine schedule became an ordinary checkbox and therefore a gift. The cooling blanket folded on a shelf and became a square of winter with no feelings about us at all. Kali learned water again, first in spoons thickened to proof, then in honestly watery water, then in a juice box with too much sugar and the exact right shape of straw. She wrote KL in a hand that would improve with irritation. She swore at a sock under her breath and earned 3 nurses' loyalty forever. Jonah got her to sit, then stand longer. We added knobs and removed tubes and rearranged invincible furniture into a room a child could claim with a backpack. Her friends visited and behaved better than most adults. They brought a drawing of the slide they were skipping and nose clips drawn like ridiculous mustaches. Next time, one said, "We go slow and wear the dumb clips." Kali's eyes smiled like conspirators' lanterns. Her mother, not done with verbs, wrote the park. The email used the words "smelled like pennies" and "please" and post the warning where kids read and don't be gentle with the truth. Weeks later, signs appeared that said the quiet part out loud. I saw a photo in someone's feed of a mother reading those words to a boy with a towel for a cape, and he made the face of a child contractually obligated to mock. Then he put on the clip because her finger under the words turned suggestion into law. We won't get to claim that life. We will suspect it with our whole hearts. Kali moved to the floor with a walker she planned to fire. We waved without sentimentality because people who stay alive in our rooms should not become our careers. I erased 245 from the whiteboard with my sleeve, and it felt like closing a book at a sentence I meant to quote forever. On the warmer shelf, Sonia's snowflake lived small and immodest on the label, cooling blanket clean. No one admitted to drawing it. Everyone knew. She returned to us with the exact right frequency, first for clinic, then for a visit carrying a grocery bag that clinked. The bag held purple polish with a star on the lid and a packet of cookies bought, not baked, which is more respectful. Clearance earned, she said, less roll in her eyes now, more gravity. She told me noise was rude sometimes and light could be a bully and stares liked to make threats. She also told me which teacher would not let her get away with anything. I liked that teacher without needing to meet her. In radiology, a poster went up, kids in clips, grinning with the seriousness of children on a mission. The caption said what posters say. The small print said what hospitals say. Some names and details have been changed to protect privacy. The gratitude is real. I drank my coffee under it on a night that wanted nothing and everything, and I let the sentence settle into the place where this job keeps its ballast. Here's what people ask for when they want morals: a banner. I offer index cards. Do the next right thing. If you freeze, count to 3 and do it anyway. Control what you can. Name what you can't. And the sentence this room wrote on our board in letters as small as we could stand. Never say never. Say not yet. The rest is paperwork and pads and amber drops and electrodes and styrofoam in a storm and a mother repeating, "I'm here," until the word builds a bridge, and a father holding cool metal with 2 fingers because someone has to hold something, and a nurse thanking alarms out loud because gratitude is measurable, and a girl shaping her mouth around mom at 6:31 while July becomes January and back again on purpose. The day she went back to the water park, the weather did its August impression. She wore the clip and surrendered 1 minute to teasing, then took it back with interest. She picked the gentle slide, the one that doesn't pretend to be a river. She kept the purple polish for weekends because it chips when you study. She will forget us in the right measure and remember us when someone uses the wrong word on TV. When a reporter said miracle, I'm told she corrected him with a shrug big enough to count as a thesis. A lot of people beat a clock. At home, on thunder nights, the dishwasher hums just right and her mother pauses at the sink because for 1 long second, it sounds like a cooling blanket breathing. She turns off the kitchen light, goes to bed, and the sound reverts to an appliance doing its work, which is what we all want to be when the room finally lets us. I walk past the shelf, the poster, the warmer card with the word warm rubbed pale by fingers that needed a talisman, and into another room that has to become something it isn't. I line up syringes, think an alarm, believe my palm, write the times in letters that erase clean, count to 3, speak in verbs, and argue with never by making winter where summer insists on itself. When it works, we call it care. When it doesn't, we call it grief and go back in anyway. If you require one last image, give it this: a folded cooling blanket on a tidy shelf, winter domesticated for a building that hoards July, a whiteboard scrubbed, but for a ghost of 2:45 when the light hits just right, a nurse's badge with a paper square worn soft from being read, a purple polish bottle with a star in a drawer where we keep the good bandage scissors, a small snowflake drawn in pen on a label no one signs, and a child's voice, recovered and wry, telling a friend at the edge of A, pool, clip on. Don't be dramatic before they cannonball into a future that, for once, smells like chlorine and not pennies.